Marina had always believed she would leave the school quietly, just as she had lived most of her life, discreetly, politely, and without commotion. She had dedicated more than 3 decades to teaching Portuguese at a public school on the outskirts of the city. Her students came and went like waves, some crashing violently, others retreating silently. She'd seen it all. Or so she thought. She was 2 months from retirement, and everyone kept reminding her, teachers, students, even the janitor with his broken clock and endless jokes. They talked as if freedom awaited her like a prize behind a locked door. But deep down, Marina felt a growing void. She wasn't afraid of being free. She was afraid of becoming invisible. One rainy Tuesday morning, she arrived early. The school's halls were still asleep, smelling faintly of chalk and wet cement. As she reached the back courtyard, she noticed something huddled beneath the window of the reading room. A small, shivering dog, soaked to the bone, its fur matted and its eyes swollen with fear. She crouched down carefully, speaking softly. The dog didn't growl, it didn't move, it simply looked at her as if begging not to be seen and not to be abandoned again. She felt something stir inside her chest, something that had been asleep for years. The bell rang. Marina wrapped the dog in her coat and placed it inside a cardboard box near the heater in the library. She didn't tell anyone. Every morning after that, she came in early, bringing food, water, and quiet company. She cleaned the dog's wound, a cut on its leg, and whispered poems into the silence. Slowly, the animal began to trust her. A week later, she wasn't alone. Vinicius, the school's most troubled student, was standing in the doorway watching her. He was 15, maybe 16. Sharp jaw, messy hair, and eyes too old for his face. He had a reputation, fights, suspensions, cold silence. Teachers called him unreachable. But there he was, watching Marina tend to the dog. He didn't say anything that day, just stood there. The next day, he returned. And the next, until one morning he knelt beside her and asked, "What's his name?" "He doesn't have one yet." "Then let's call him Tobias." And just like that, the silence between them began to break. Chapter 1. Hearts in Silence. The reading room had become her sanctuary. Every day before sunrise, Marina arrived at the school an hour early, long before students flooded the corridors with noise and chaos. She brought warm leftovers wrapped in foil, a soft towel to lay on the floor, and fresh water in a reused yogurt cup. Tobias, the once wounded stray, was always waiting. His leg had started to heal, though he still limped slightly when he walked. But more than that, something had changed in his eyes. The fear was fading. He no longer flinched when she reached out. In fact, he began to lean into her hand, pressing his head gently into her palm as if to say, "You can trust me now." What Marina hadn't expected was that someone else had been watching. At first, Vinicius just hovered near the door, pretending to be on his way to the bathroom. Then he started showing up earlier and earlier, always silent, always standing, until, one rainy Thursday morning, she turned and saw him sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Tobias, gently scratching behind the dog's ear. She said nothing, neither did he. In the weeks that followed, it became their unspoken ritual. The 3 of them tucked away in the soft light of the reading room, while the school around them roared to life with shouts and slamming lockers. Their little sanctuary remained quiet, timeless. Vinicius wasn't like the other students. He didn't try to impress anyone. He rarely raised his hand in class, and he never made eye contact with teachers. His file was thick: disciplinary notes, failing grades, missed parent meetings. Marina had once overheard a colleague say, "That boy's a lost cause." But she no longer believed in lost causes. One morning, as they sat in silence, she asked gently, "Why do you think Tobias was left here?" Vinicius shrugged. "Maybe someone didn't want him anymore. Or maybe they hoped he'd be found by someone who cared," she replied. He looked at her then, really looked, his dark eyes searching hers like someone peeking through a half-open door. And in that moment, she saw it. The grief he tried to hide, the fear behind the attitude, the questions that no one had ever bothered to answer. He wasn't broken, just bruised. That same day, Marina left a book on the floor beside Tobias, an old copy of The Little Prince. The next morning, it was gone. She never asked about it. But 2 days later, she found a drawing tucked inside her own desk, a boy and a fox sitting under a star. No name, no note, but it said more than words ever could. Over time, she learned to read Vinicius by his silences. When he was angry, he arrived late and didn't speak. When he was at peace, he sat with Tobias, quietly humming under his breath. And when he was hurting, he cleaned the dog's bowl 5 times and folded the towel over and over like it might unravel the pain inside him. Then, one Friday afternoon, something shifted. Marina had stayed late to finish grading papers. The halls were empty. She walked toward the reading room to check on Tobias and heard something, a soft sob, quickly stifled. She peeked in and saw Vinicius sitting with his back against the wall, the dog curled at his side. His hands were shaking. She entered quietly, sat beside him. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie and muttered, "He reminds me of someone." She waited. "My mom. She used to say I was like a stray, always running away, never letting anyone get close." He paused. "She left 3 years ago. I guess she gave up." Marina didn't reply. She placed a hand on his shoulder, solid, steady. "You're not a stray," she whispered. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the dog. "Maybe I just needed someone to stop chasing me and just sit still." That night, she went home and cried, not out of sadness, but from the ache of witnessing a heart begin to open. A boy who'd been labeled dangerous was, in truth, just a boy, longing to be seen, heard, held. From that day on, Marina began including him in quiet, unofficial ways. She invited him to help reorganize the shelves in the reading room. She asked his opinion on which books to donate. She let him choose the name tags for the students' lockers, small tasks, but meaningful, and Tobias. He was now a fixture of the school, though still unofficial. Students began leaving scraps of food, and some even asked to pet him, but Tobias only followed 2 people, Marina and Vinicius. One morning, just before winter break, Marina arrived, to find a note taped to her desk. "Thanks for saving him, but mostly, thanks for seeing me." She folded the paper and placed it in her purse like a relic. Her eyes welled up. She knew then that something sacred had begun, not just a friendship, not just a healing, but the kind of bond that echoes long after the bell rings. Chapter 2. Where We Belong. The winter break came and went, leaving behind frost-bitten mornings and a stillness that stretched through the halls of the school. Marina returned a week before the students, as she always did. She missed the early hours, the creak of floorboards, the scent of old books and wet asphalt. But mostly she missed Tobias and Vinicius. The reading room was as she had left it, quiet, untouched. A folded blanket still lay by the shelf where Tobias usually rested. But the dog was nowhere to be found. Her heart skipped. She searched the courtyard, behind the cafeteria, even in the janitor's closet, where Tobias had once hidden from a thunderstorm. Nothing. She returned to her desk, trying not to panic. And then she noticed it, a note folded neatly, placed between 2 books. "Tobias is safe. I had to take him for a while. Please don't worry. I'll explain soon. V." The handwriting was his, messy but careful. She sat down heavily, trying to piece it together. Why would he take Tobias? Where? Why not just ask? Days passed. When classes resumed, Marina waited for Vinicius every morning. But he didn't come. She asked the secretary. "Vinicius Nogueira. He hasn't been enrolled this semester. Transferred schools, I think. There was no notice. No record of a guardian. Gone. Just like that. The boy who had once sat silently in the doorway had vanished, taking with him not just a stray dog, but a piece of her heart. Weeks went by. Marina tried to let go. She focused on her final lessons, her students, the small goodbyes building toward her retirement. But every time she walked past the reading room, a lump formed in her throat. One afternoon, as she erased the board after a class, the door creaked open. A student poked her head in. "Miss Marina, there's someone outside asking for you." Her heart fluttered. She stepped out into the hallway, then through the front gate. And there, beneath the old fig tree by the sidewalk, stood Vinicius. Taller now, hair a little longer, hoodie worn and faded. Beside him sat Tobias, tail wagging slowly, head tilted. She froze. "You disappeared," she said, barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to," he replied. "They moved me. Foster system, far away. I couldn't leave him behind." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why didn't you call? Right? I didn't think you'd still care." She walked toward him slowly and pulled him into an embrace. He stiffened at first, then melted into it. "I never stopped," she whispered. They sat on the bench together. Tobias curled at their feet like a puzzle piece that had finally found its place. Vinicius explained everything. After his mother left, he'd bounced between relatives, shelters, and temporary homes. Over the break, child services had placed him in another city. When he learned they were coming, he'd taken Tobias, afraid the school would send the dog away, or worse. He kept him hidden, fed him scraps, walked him at night. "That dog saved me," he said. "He gave me something to protect when I didn't care about myself anymore." Marina listened, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You gave him love when no one else would. Just like you gave me something to hold on to when I thought I was done making a difference." He smiled, for the first time in a long time. "You were the first adult who didn't give up on me," he said. She reached into her bag and handed him a small notebook. Inside, it was filled with quotes, photos, and handwritten reflections from their time together. "Keep it," she said, "for the days you forget who you really are." As they stood to leave, Marina looked back at the school, her second home. For over 30 years, she had spent her life teaching grammar, literature, and poetry, but her greatest lesson had nothing to do with words. It had everything to do with silence. Enjoyed this story? Then subscribe to the Golden Words channel so you won't miss any others. Every day, we bring you touching and emotional stories. Leave a comment with the city and country you're listening from. Let's spread these stories worldwide.